Alright, so we've got all of our pieces made for the wild clematis, and it's time to start putting them together. We're going to start by putting the stamen pieces together. Now you're going to take the Unit A piece, which should look like a little tuft, and we're going to put the stem wires for that unit right into the center of Unit B and push them all the way together. And we're going to twist the two stem wires below. You don't need to twist it all the way down, only about an inch will be fine. And then curl all of those outer loops from Unit B around the center. So when you're done, your stamen should look just like this one. Now before we can put it together, we need to wrap the stems all with floral tape. So you're going to cut a couple feet of the floral tape off of the spool. And then what I like to do is to cut it in half. I do have a purpose for cutting it in half. I like to put floral tape on the stems just so that there's a little bit better grip, but thinner tape on the component wires will help keep the stem of your flower a little bit thinner so it doesn't get as bulky. Alright, so I've got my little half-width tape here, and I'm going to stretch the end to activate the stickies in the tape. And then I'm going to wrap it around the stem of my stamen and spin it. And then I'm going to stretch the tape as I wrap down. And I'm going to go ahead and go all the way to the end. Alright, so you will also want to wrap the stem wires on all of your petals and all of your leaves. Alright. Okay, now also, while you've got your floral tape out, we've got 4 stem wires, 4 16-gauge stem wires that we're using for the flower stems on our wild clematis, and we need to wrap those with floral tape as well. And I'm just going to use full width tape for this. I'm going to take the end and stretch it a little bit, and then fold it right over the tip, kind of at an angle. And then I'm going to fold it around that tip and stick it to itself on the other side. Fold the little top down. And then I'm going to wrap down at an angle. And I'm going to stretch the tape as I go to activate the stickies. And you will need to do that to all 4 of those stem wires. Now, before we can put the leaves together, we need to wrap the stems on just the small leaves with some embroidery floss, because I am flossing my stems, and I need to do these little ones first because they do stick out a little bit from the main stem. So I have a little bit of length there that I need to floss before I assemble. So I've cut a couple feet of my embroidery thread, and I'm going to divide it in half so that there's 2 3-strand lengths instead of 1/6 strand. That's not a good divide. Let me try down here. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to divide that down all the way through. Alright, so I've got this little 3-strand thread, and I divide my floss for the same reason that I divide my floral tape. Having this thinner floss, I get better results using thinner floss, and it also helps to cut down on the bulk on your stem just a little bit. So we're going to take one of our small leaves and the very end of our thread, and we're just going to press just the bottom tail of the thread right against the stem of the leaf. And with one hand, I'm going to pinch and hold that thread together right below that last row of beads. And then with the other hand, I'm going to start wrapping this thread around the stem. And as you wrap this thread, you want to make sure that you're untwisting it so that all the threads sit directly beside each other instead of bunching up on top of each other. You'll get a much smoother stem that way. So I'm going to keep wrapping down this little stem, covering over that tail thread that we started with, and untwisting my thread as I go. And after a little while, I like to flip my leaf upside down, and then I can just spin it. And we're going to wrap down to about 3/4 of an inch below the leaf. And then to secure the end of this floss, normally I would wrap with floral tape to secure the end of floss, but I don't really want to add any more bulk to my little leaf stem here, and adding floral tape now will do that. So instead I'm going to tie a little knot right in the thread, right around the stem, just to secure the ends. All right, so you're going to do that to all 4 of these small leaves. You do not need to wrap the stems on the large leaves. All right, now it's time to go ahead and put the leaf stems together. For one leaf stem, you'll need 1 large leaf and 2 small leaves. All right, so you should already have your 16 gauge stem wire wrapped with floral tape and ready to go. You'll also want to cut a couple feet of floral tape and then cut it in half to make a thinner tape. And we're going to start with the large leaf right at the end of the stem. We'll lay that on top of our 16 gauge stem wire. And then we're going to take our floral tape, stretch the end of it to activate the stickies, and then we're going to wrap that around the leaf and the 16 gauge stem wire, attach it to itself on the other side, and then we're going to wrap this leaf on using just floral tape this time, because that is an option. And I'm stretching the tape as I go. I'm angling downward, and I'm making sure that the stem of my leaf is not wrapping around the 16 gauge stem. And if you do notice it's starting to wrap around, go ahead and fix it before you continue down. Oh, you know what I forgot? The other leaves. All right. Okay, so we're going to wrap down about an inch below the large leaf. And then we're going to take one of our small leaves and we're going to bend right below where that floss ends. All right, so we're going to lay that directly beside the stem. And then we're going to include that in a wrap one time just to hold it on. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm looking at the back side of my leaf stem now. So I'm going to, you can look at the front if you want, it's okay. This is just comfortable for me. But bend it the opposite direction so that you've got the right side of the leaf going there. All right. So added that second leaf. And then we're going to wrap down. Now, as you're wrapping down, you want to make sure that none of these little stem wires wrap around that stem. I'm noticing as I'm wrapping down that 2 of these wires are ending in the same spot. So I'm going to go ahead and trim one of them a little bit shorter, so I don't want them all to end at the same spot. All right, so this is what your leaf stem should look like at this point. We're going to go ahead and add some floss to this main part of the stem. And to do that, we're going to do it just like we did the leaves. We're going to cut several feet of of the embroidery thread and divide it in half to 3 strands. And then we're going to take a little tail of the floss and put it right against that main leaf stem, or that large leaf. And I'm going to go ahead and bend very carefully. I'm going to bend these small leaves out of the way so that I can wrap a little bit easier. Pinch and hold that in place with one hand, and then with the other, I'm going to wrap this floss around the stem. And just like before, I'm untwisting my floss as I go. And then once I've got a fairly secure hold on that tail, I can let go of that and then just spin my stem. All right, now as I'm coming up to these leaves, I want to make sure that my floss is getting right into the crack between the leaf and the stem. I might need to pull it down a little bit if needed. I've already gotten into the crack with this first leaf here that I added on, so I'm going to go ahead and fold that leaf back into place. And then it looks like I need to wrap 1 or 2 times for the next leaf, and then I can bend that one as well. And then I'm just going to continue on down my stem about 2 or 3 inches. All right, so now I've got my floss wrapped down about 2 or 3 inches below those last leaves. And I'm going to cut that short. And then I'm going to cover over that bottom tail of thread with floral tape to secure it. You could also just tie a knot if you'd like. All right, so there we have one finished leaf stem for our wild clematis. And you're going to want to go ahead and make a second leaf stem if you are making the full-sized wild clematis stem. All right, now it's time to put the flowers together. For each flower, you should have 1 stamen and 4 petals. And you should also have your 16 gauge stem wires prepared and ready to go. Now to start, we're going to put the stamen right at the end of the wire. And I'm going to cut a little length of floral tape in half to make thin tape. And I'm going to put the stamen right at the tip of the stem wire. And if there's any room, go ahead and put that stem wire up inside just a little bit. And then we're going to attach this stamen just the same way as we did the leaves. All right. So now we've got our stamen attached to the end, and we're going to add in our petals. And before we put them on, we're going to do a little bit of pre-shaping. Not all the way, just a little bit. We're going to bend the stem back about 90 degrees. And then put your thumb right at the bottom of the leaf. Now I want to point out here that I'm putting my thumb on the back side. It should be the side with the wire wrap showing. I'm putting my thumb there and then just kind of bending down. And you'll end up with a petal that's shaped like this. And you're going to want to do that to all of your petals. We're going to do more shaping later. This is just to prepare for assembly. Right now you're going to want to cut a couple feet of 30 gauge wire. It doesn't matter what color. I'm using green because that's what I've got on me already. And I'm going to put 2 petals on at a time. One on one side and one on the other, directly opposite. And I'm going to pinch and hold those together, and then I'm going to add in just a little tail of the 30 gauge wire. I'm going to pinch and hold that all together really tightly. Now, this is a pretty typical assembly that you see with basic frame type petals. And one key to this type of assembly is to hold everything, to hold all of these stem wires until everything is fully attached. Now we're going to wind that wire just below the flower head, just 3 or 4 times to hold those first petals really tight. And I'm not going to let go while I add in my other 2 petals. And these ones are going to be on, if this was left and right, this would be front and back here. I'm just going to add those in without fully letting go of any of my stems, just to make sure that they all stay secure. All right, then I'm going to wind that 30 gauge wire around to add in those last 2 petals 3 or 4 times. And then I'm going to start wrapping down the stem below my flower. And I'm just going to move my hand down as I go. I want to make sure that my stem is shaped properly and not kind of weird. So I am molding my stem wires as needed to make sure that my stem isn't funky shape. But I also want to make sure that these stem wires don't start twisting around my stem. So I'm going to wrap down. You only need to go about 1 inch below the flower. And then to tie off, I'm going to lift up one of these stems and just wind the wire around it 1 time, and then you can just trim it off. All right, so I'm going to look over my stems, all of my petal stems, and I'm going to make sure that they aren't all ending in the same spot. And some of them are, so I'm going to go ahead and trim a couple of them. Let's do one up here and one here. I'm doing this because I want my stem to taper down in width instead of all ending right at the same spot. And that just gives you a much smoother stem, a nicer looking stem. So yeah, trim your stems, all of your little petal stems to different lengths. And then we're going to cover over with floral tape. You can use full width tape for this, it doesn't matter. But just make sure that you are attached right below that flower head. All right. And then you're going to wrap over that just as you would as you were preparing a stem. Stretch your tape as you go down. Make sure that those stem wires don't twist around. All right, so your flower should look something like this once you've got all the pieces attached. And now we're going to add floss down our stem, just like we did with the leaf branches, but we're going to floss down about 8 inches. Because this stem does taper right below the flower head, it can be a little bit difficult to floss, so just be patient and undo it if you need to, unwrap it, and then rewrap it if you need to make sure that you get full coverage there. If you are having a very difficult time with that, you can start at the bottom and work your way up to the top. So I find it sometimes it's a little bit easier to wrap up that taper rather than down it. But then to end your floss, you would need to wrap around one of these flower petals and then use a little tiny, tiny dot of glue to seal the end of that floss. All right, so I'm going to keep wrapping down until I'm about 8 inches below the flower head. All right, so now I've got both of these stems for my flowers flossed. I did wrap them to different lengths because I don't want my flowers to be the same height in the flower stem. This first one I wrapped down to about 8 inches, and then this other one I did about 6.5. But you can do I do recommend doing a different length for each one, but you can vary that a little bit if you want to. But you do want probably at least 5 inches on each flower. And then to secure the end of the floss, I just wrapped over with floral tape. Alright, so we've got both of our flowers and both of our leaf stems put together, and now we're going to combine them together into one stem. So I'm going to take one of my flowers, it doesn't matter which one, and we're going to use some floral tape to attach these together. So I'm going to match up where the floss ends on each of these stems, and that's where I'm going to join them together. And I am going to wrap all the way down to the bottom. And I do want to make sure that these stems aren't twisting around each other. All right. I've got my stems at different lengths here, so I'm going to go ahead and trim them to the same length. Alright, so we've got one leaf branch added in. Let's do the other flower next. So I'm going to take my other flower, and again I'm going to match up where the floss ends, right at the junction of the leaf and the other flower. And again we're going to use another length of floral tape to attach it in. Now I kind of positioned my stem here. Let me show you this real fast. Do you see how these two together kind of make a flat and wide stem there? I'm intentionally positioning my other flower on one of the flat sides to help round out the stem. So when I add this in, it rounds out the whole stem altogether, so it's not flat and long anymore. All right, wrap all the way down to the end and make sure you've got a nice secure hold. And again, I'm going to trim. We're actually going to floss down a little bit further below this junction before we add in the last stem. So I've already got several feet of floss prepared. I've cut it and divided it into 3 strands. And just like before, with all the other times that we've flossed, we're just going to add in by holding that tail, holding that tail flat against the stem, and then wrapping around. And as soon as you got that secured, flip it upside down, and then you can just spin it. That way none of your other stems are getting in the way of your hands while you're wrapping. Alright, let's go down about 1/2 inch there. That should be fine. I'm going to leave my floss attached. And then I'm going to take my leaf stem, and I'm going to match up my floss right down to the bottom. Pull my floss out of the way there. And then use a little bit of floral tape to attach them together. I'm going to cut a little bit of floral tape from my spool here so it doesn't wind around. Alright. So I'm going to attach this new leaf in with my floral tape. I'm not spinning my stem because I still have my embroidery floss attached up there and I don't want it to wind around my stem. Alright, down to the bottom there. And I'm going to trim this stem and hope I don't break anything. Okay. Alright, so I've still got my floss attached here so I can just keep wrapping. And I only need to go down a little ways. How far you go down here, it depends on how far you want your flowers to sit above your vase. It's going to vary a little bit from one person to the next. I'm not 100% sure how far I need mine to go down, so I'm going to go a couple inches just for a little bit of security. And then when I'm done, I'm going to secure the end of my floss with some more floral tape. Now that we've got everything attached, it's time to do some shaping. Now with this type of clematis, the flowers always point down. So I'm going to bend my stems so that my flowers bend downward. They point towards the ground. And then over here, I'm going to go the opposite direction. All right. All right, so they should always bend down towards the ground with this flower. And then I'm going to add some bends into my leaf stems, because this is actually a vine plant, so we don't want our leaf stems to be too straight. So I'm going to add some curves in there. And do the same over here. Maybe this one will come down a little bit. Okay, I can play with it more later, but just to give you an idea there, make sure that you add some kinks into your leaf stems. We want to make sure that our petals are not flat and boring. The shaping of this flower is pretty simple though. I'm going to grab the tips, just the tip of the petals, and bend them out. And then I think I'm going to add some twists in there as well. Let's twist this one over here just a little bit. Just to give it a little bit extra something so that it looks a little bit more live, a little bit more movement. Let's do it to this one too. Let's twist that one. All right, I'm going to do the same thing to my flower over here. Bend out the tips. I'm going to make this flower open just a little bit wider. And then I'm going to twist at least one of the petals. All right, now we're going to do something similar to the leaves here. We don't want flat leaves, so we're going to shape them all a little bit differently. So let's bend this one and curl that top up. And then let's maybe add a little bit of a wave in the side. I'm going to put my thumb under that edge and then 2 fingers on top. Kind of push up with my thumb while pushing down with both fingers. Make a little bit of a wave there in the edge. Now let's fold this leaf. Let's fold it in half a little bit. And maybe we'll curl that tip down a little bit, kind of twist it sideways and point it down. This leaf, I'm going to pull it upward like this. And then let's just go like that. Okay, now over here, let's give this leaf a little twist here. You don't have to shape all of your leaves exactly the same, but do something to all of them. Don't leave any of them flat. Maybe I'll turn these so they... Yeah, okay. So that's pretty decent for now. I'm going to go back and play with it a little bit more later. But just to show you basically how you would shape a flower like this, you know, maybe I'll bend this out a little bit more. Okay, so I want to show you 2 other of these flowers that I made. And this one is pretty similar. I've got that double flower going on 2 leaf stems. My flowers are similar heights. And then I also have a 3rd stem where I only made 1 flower. but I used the same number of leaves. I did this intentionally. I wanted to make sure that my stems didn't all look exactly the same. I am making a wildflower bouquet out of these, so I didn't want it to look too manicured or too planned out. I mean, obviously I had to plan it because it's made out of beads, but I didn't want my entire arrangement to look exactly the same everywhere. So I did a variety of flower stems to help give that wildflower look a little bit more organic.